We're now ready to turn to the next part of the civics test. This part deals with American history, and it begins with some questions about the colonial period and independence. And these are the earliest portions of the story of the United States. So when you're ready, let's move on to the next part of the civics test, and we'll start with question 58. What is one reason colonists came to America? The country that we now know as the United States was founded by colonists, mainly from various countries in Europe. These colonists came for many different reasons. Some came for political or religious reasons. These colonists wanted to live in a country where they could enjoy freedom to live and worship as they pleased. Some of them had been oppressed in Europe, and they had been unable to express their political ideas openly, or they had been forbidden to worship in the way they chose. And so they came to America hoping to find the freedom to live and worship that they did not enjoy in Europe. Other colonists came to America in search of a better life, where they and their families could make more money and become prosperous. So there were various reasons for colonists coming to America. To answer this question, you only need to name one of these reasons. So a correct answer could be freedom, or political liberty, or religious freedom, or economic opportunity, or to practice their religion, or to escape persecution. All of these are good ways of describing some of the reasons why colonists first came to America. Question 59. Who lived in America before the Europeans arrived? Before the coming of the European colonists, America was not empty. There were people living here who had been in these lands for many centuries. They are known by two names. Sometimes they are called Native Americans. And the word native, of course, means born here. And since these people had been born in America, it makes sense to call them Native Americans. Other times, these people are called American Indians. They have been called Indians because of a strange mistake from history. When Christopher Columbus, the explorer, made his first trip to America, he thought he had landed in the Asian country of India. So when he met people who came down to his ship wondering who this strange explorer was, he thought that those people were from India, and he called them Indians. Although this name was not really correct, it has continued to be used. So the original people who lived in America before the coming of the European colonists are known by two names. A correct answer for this question could be American Indians or Native Americans. Question 60. What group of people was taken to America and sold as slaves? As I've mentioned, many of the European colonists came to America in search of freedom. Freedom to live, to worship as they pleased, freedom to practice politics in the way they believed. Sadly, however, some of these colonists in search of freedom took away freedom from other people. These colonists needed workers to help farm the land and to build their towns in their new country. And to help with this work, some of the colonists bought slaves from Africa. These slaves had been captured in war or taken prisoner by slave traders. They were brought to America and forced to work for the colonists who bought them. Slavery was a terrible crime that led to great suffering for the slaves. It took away their freedom and the freedom of their children. Slavery also caused serious problems for all Americans. So the correct answer to this question, what group of people was taken to America and sold as slaves, is Africans, or people from Africa. Question 61. Why did the colonists fight the British? Well, we mentioned that the story of America begins with the European colonists coming to this country, finding a land that was inhabited by the Native Americans or Indians and slowly building their own countries here. For more than 250 years, these European colonists built farms and towns and cities in America. This was during the 1500s, the 1600s, and the early 1700s. And all through this time, the colonists were ruled by governments in Europe, in countries such as France, Spain, and especially England or Britain. Eventually, many of the colonists living in America grew tired of this. They wanted to rule themselves rather than to be ruled by governments far across the ocean. During the 1700s, many of these American colonists became more and more angry at the British government. They had several specific complaints, things that they did not like about the British government. One is that the colonists had to pay high taxes that didn't bring them any worthwhile government services. Another is that they had no say over how their taxes were used because the colonists were not represented in the British legislature called the Parliament. Yet another complaint that the colonists had is that soldiers from the British Army would come to live in their houses, a practice called the boarding or the quartering of soldiers. You can imagine how you would feel if a soldier came to your home and said, "I'm moving in, whether you like it or not." In the end, all of these complaints came down to one basic complaint. The American colonists were unhappy because they could not rule themselves. They wanted self-government, and as long as they were colonists, they couldn't be self-governing. So you can answer this question correctly by naming any of the complaints that were reasons why the colonists decided to fight the British for their freedom. Correct answers would include because of high taxes, because of taxation without representation, because the British Army stayed in their houses, boarding or quartering, or because they didn't have self-government. All of these are ways to describe the reasons that the colonists decided to fight against the British for their freedom. Question 62. Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? As I've mentioned, the Declaration of Independence was written in 1776 to explain to the world why the colonists had decided to become an independent nation rather than being ruled by Britain. The Declaration of Independence was signed by many leaders of the colonists. The main writer of the Declaration was Thomas Jefferson, who later became the third president of the United States. So the correct answer for this question, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, is Thomas Jefferson. Question 63. When was the Declaration of Independence adopted? The Declaration of Independence was adopted or agreed to by most of the leaders of the American colonies at a meeting in the city of Philadelphia on July 4th, 1776. This date is one of the most important days in American history. In fact, to this day, we celebrate every July 4th as Independence Day. So the right answer to this question, when was the Declaration of Independence adopted, is July 4th, 1776. Question 64. There were 13 original states. Name 3. There were 13 British colonies that fought for and won their independence together. Within a few years, these 13 colonies agreed to form a single nation known as the United States. The colonies became known as states within this new nation. If you look at this map, you'll see that all 13 colonies were located on the eastern coast of North America on the Atlantic Ocean. To answer this question correctly, you just need to name any 3 of these 13 states. So any 3 of the following are correct: New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Next, question 65. What happened at the Constitutional Convention? After the 13 colonies won their independence from Britain, they formed a loose partnership. This partnership among the 13 colonies was organized according to a document called the Articles of Confederation. But after several years, it became clear that this loose partnership wasn't working very well. The government of the 13 colonies wasn't very efficient or effective, and the people of America weren't very happy with the way this loose government was working. So the 13 colonies sent representatives to a meeting in Philadelphia to create a new kind of partnership. At this meeting, a new document was written that created a stronger central government. This document is what we know as the Constitution. So this meeting became known as the Constitutional Convention, one of the most important gatherings in the history of the United States. So the correct answer to this question about what happened at the Constitutional Convention is the Constitution was written, or the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution. Question 66. When was the Constitution written? The Constitutional Convention that I just described took place in 1787. So the correct answer to this question is 1787. Question 67. The Federalist Papers supported the passage of the U.S. Constitution. Name one of the writers. After the Constitution was written, copies of this document were sent to all the states. The document was printed in newspapers and handed out in the form of printed flyers and leaflets. Thousands of people throughout America read this new Constitution. And a debate took place as to whether the Constitution was a good thing or not. Many people throughout America liked the new Constitution, and they wanted it to become the law of the land. But some people did not like the proposed new Constitution. Some felt that it gave the national or federal government too much power. Those who supported the new Constitution became known as Federalists. Those who opposed it were known as the Anti-Federalists. As you may know, the prefix anti in English means against. So those who were against the Federalists were the Anti-Federalists. A famous part of the debate throughout America about the Constitution was the publication of a series of articles by three of the great Federalist leaders. And these articles are known today as the Federalist Papers. People still read the Federalist Papers today. They are considered the best explanation of how the Constitution works. These Federalist Papers describe the philosophy behind the new American government, and they explain how democracy was supposed to work according to the thinking of the Founding Fathers. To answer this question correctly, you have to name one of the three authors of these articles known as the Federalist Papers. The three men who wrote these articles were Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. Any one of these three names would be an acceptable answer to the question. Or you could give the name Publius, which was the pen name or pseudonym that was signed to the papers when they were first published. So the correct answer to this question is James Madison, or Alexander Hamilton, or John Jay, or Publius. Question 68. What is one thing Benjamin Franklin is famous for? One of the great leaders of the independence movement in the American colonies was Benjamin Franklin. He came from Philadelphia in Pennsylvania and was known as a man of many talents. He wrote and published a very popular book known as Poor Richard's Almanac, which contained wise and clever sayings, along with useful information for farmers and others. Franklin was also a scientist and inventor. He started a system of free public libraries for the people of Philadelphia. During the War for Independence, Benjamin Franklin served as the American ambassador to France, that is, the representative of the American colonies to France, and he convinced the French government to help the Americans win their freedom from Great Britain. And when the new government was formed under the Constitution, Benjamin Franklin served as the first Postmaster General. That is, he ran the post office for the new American government. So a correct answer to this question could mention any of these remarkable accomplishments by this very versatile, talented man, Benjamin Franklin. A correct answer could be he was a U.S. diplomat, or he was the oldest member of the Constitutional Convention, or he was the first Postmaster General of the United States, or he was the writer of Poor Richard's Almanac, or he started the first free libraries. Any of these would be a correct answer to the question of what did Benjamin Franklin do? Question 69. Who is the father of our country? The single greatest leader among the founders of our nation was George Washington. He led the American army that fought against the British for our freedom. And that army, although it was much smaller and poorer and less powerful than the British Army, succeeded in winning freedom for the American colonies and driving the British Army off of American soil. George Washington also led the Constitutional Convention. He organized that meeting and helped direct it to the successful writing of the Constitution that we still follow to this day. George Washington also served as the first president of the United States. Because of these varied and important roles, George Washington is often called the father of our country. He is also honored in a very special way. His face appears on the front of the $1 bill. So if you ever forget what the father of our country looks like, just reach into your wallet or your pocket. You probably have a picture of him there. The correct answer to this question is George Washington. Question 70. Who was the first president? This is a question with a star, so if you're among the older applicants for citizenship, this is one of the questions you need to be able to answer. Again, our first president, also known as the father of our country, was George Washington. By the way, in case you are wondering, our second president was John Adams. His name will come up again in this program. Listen for it. One of the important and interesting facts about John Adams is that he and his wife, Abigail Adams, were the first president and president's wife to live in the beautiful building known as the White House. The White House in Washington, D.C. has become an important symbol of the United States of America. People around the world recognize the image of the White House because they know that's where the President of the United States lives. George Washington never lived in the White House because it wasn't completed until the year 1800, by which time John Adams, our second president, was in office. So he and his wife were the first to occupy this beautiful building known as the White House. Once again, however, the answer to this question, who was the first president, is George Washington. The next portion of the history section in the civics test is about the 1800s, the next era in American history, and it begins with question 71. What territory did the United States buy from France in 1803? As you know, the first 13 states were all on the Atlantic coast of North America. Over time, the United States grew to fill much of the continent from east to west until it reached the Pacific Ocean. One of the largest pieces of land to be added to the United States was known as the Louisiana Territory. Formerly owned by France, this land, known as the Louisiana Territory, was bought by the U.S. government under President Thomas Jefferson in the year 1803. The Louisiana Territory included the state of Louisiana, but it also included much more land, as you can see on this map. In fact, the Louisiana Territory included areas that today make up all or part of 15 states. The land that we bought in the Louisiana Territory became some of the most fertile farmland in the world, and helped to produce much of the wealth that has made the United States a very prosperous country. So the purchase of the Louisiana Territory by President Thomas Jefferson was one of the wisest acts by any American president. The correct answer to this question, what territory did the United States buy from France in 1803, is the Louisiana Territory, or Louisiana. Question 72. Name one war fought by the United States in the 1800s. The United States fought 4 major wars during the 1800s. The War of 1812 was fought against Britain. It had little impact on later American history. If the United States had lost the War of 1812, it's possible that Britain might have been able to regain control over its former North American colonies. But the war ended in a stalemate, or an inconclusive result, and the United States retained its freedom. Ultimately, the United States and Britain became close allies, a relationship that continues to this day. So the War of 1812 was the first of 4 wars fought by the United States during the 1800s. The second was the Mexican-American War, fought from 1846 to 1848. This was a war between the United States and the country of Mexico, which is just to the southwest of the United States. The Mexican-American War resulted in large areas in the American Southwest being taken away from Mexico and being given to the United States. This includes all or parts of the states of California, New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. The Mexican-American War also led to Mexico accepting the annexation or joining of Texas, which had formerly been a part of Mexico, into the United States. So as a result of the Mexican-American War, large territories were added to the United States. The third major war fought during the 1800s was the Civil War. This war was fought from 1861 to 1865, and it was a war between the northern states of the United States and the southern states. The war was fought mainly about the issue of slavery. The northern victory in the Civil War resulted in the reuniting of the country. The northern and southern states rejoined as one country, and it also resulted in the end of slavery. The fourth and final major war fought by the United States during the 1800s was the Spanish-American War, and this was fought in 1898 between the United States and Spain. The Spanish-American War resulted in the United States taking over the territories of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, as well as the loss of the island nation of Cuba by Spain. So the correct answer to this question about the wars fought by the United States in the 1800s would require you to name any one of these wars: the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the Civil War, or the Spanish-American War. Question 73. Name the U.S. war between the North and the South. As I've mentioned, the war between the northern states and the southern states of the United States took place from 1861 to 1865. This war has 2 names, either one of which is a correct answer to this question: the Civil War or the War between the states. Either one would be a correct answer to this question. Question 74. Name one problem that led to the Civil War. Before the Civil War, the northern and southern states had quarreled for many years. Most of the disagreements had to do with slavery. Black slaves from Africa were forced to work for white masters in the states of the South. As I explained before, they had been brought over on ships from Africa, where they were sold in America to white slave owners who used them to work on their farms or in their towns. Now, many people in the North believed that slavery was wrong, and they wanted the slaves to be freed. Arguments over this issue became more and more intense and emotional throughout the 1840s and the 1850s. Many people in the North wanted slavery to be ended, while many white people in the South, especially those who owned slaves, insisted that slavery was right, and they wanted slavery to continue. Now, throughout this time, settlers from the United States were moving west across the North American continent. As they moved west, they created states that wanted to join the United States, to become part of the Union. Each time a new state was added to the Union, there were arguments over whether it should be a state in which slavery was permitted or a state in which slavery was outlawed. Because the economy of the South was based largely on slavery, whites in the South felt that attacks on slavery were attacks on their way of life. They defended slavery and said it should continue. And these white Southerners also believed that each state should have the right to decide for itself whether or not to permit slavery. They encouraged the new states that were joining the Union to become slave states. They wanted to be sure that there were plenty of slave states in Congress so that votes on the issue of slavery could be expected to end in favor of slavery and in favor of the interests of the white Southerners. So the issue of slavery became a major point of disagreement between the North and the South throughout the 1800s. When these disagreements over slavery could no longer be controlled, 11 states in the South decided to start their own country. They said, let's break away from the United States and start a country of our own in which we can do things the way we want and we can maintain slavery. These Southerners who broke away or seceded from the Union called their country the Confederate States of America. Now, the national government in Washington, D.C. did not accept this decision. They said the states from the South have no right to secede from the Union, and they have no power to break up the United States and create their own country. The result was a war between the North and the South, the Civil War. So the right answer to this question, name one problem that led to the Civil War, could be any of the following. The problems that led to the Civil War included slavery, or economic reasons, or states' rights. All three of these are variations on the same answer, which is that slavery and the problems created by slavery ultimately led to the Civil War between the North and the South. Question 75. What was one important thing that Abraham Lincoln did? This is a question with a star, so it's one of the 20 most important questions in the civics test. Abraham Lincoln was President of the United States during the Civil War. Most historians believe that he and George Washington, our first president, are the two greatest presidents our country has ever had. As Commander-in-Chief of the military forces of the United States, Lincoln guided the Northern armies. These armies won the Civil War, defeating the armies of the Southern states and reuniting the country. So Lincoln played an important role as a military leader during the Civil War. Lincoln also issued an order known as the Emancipation Proclamation. This is an important document from American history. The Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves in the Southern states. It said that slaves who were held in the states of the South that were rebelling against or fighting against the North would be free. Ultimately, the Emancipation Proclamation led to the freeing of all the slaves and the end of slavery in North America. Sadly, on April 14, 1865, as the Civil War was ending, Lincoln was killed or assassinated by an angry white Southerner. Lincoln performed many important deeds during his years as president. We've mentioned a few of them here, and any one of these could be the right answer to the question, what is one important thing that Abraham Lincoln did? So you could answer this question correctly by saying, he freed the slaves, or he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, or he saved or preserved the Union, or he led the United States during the Civil War. Question 76. What did the Emancipation Proclamation do? The word emancipation means giving freedom to someone. The Emancipation Proclamation said that the slaves held in the Confederate States, the southern states that were trying to be free from the United States, it said that the slaves held in the Confederate States should be freed. As the northern armies took control in those southern states, the slaves were given their freedom. Later, an amendment to the Constitution was created, and this amendment outlawed slavery in the United States forever. So thanks to Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation, the crime of slavery was finally ended in America. A correct answer to this question, then, as to what the Emancipation Proclamation did is, it freed the slaves, or it freed the slaves in the Confederacy, or it freed the slaves in the Confederate States, or it freed the slaves in most southern states. Question 77. What did Susan B. Anthony do? Black Americans were not the only people who were denied equal rights in the United States in the 1800s. Women also lacked some of the freedoms that men enjoyed. For example, women were not permitted to vote. In many states, women were also forbidden to own property, and women were often forced to obey the orders of their husbands, even against their own wishes. As a result, many women joined together to demand their legal rights or civil rights. One of the great leaders in this women's movement was Susan B. Anthony. Beginning in the 1860s, Anthony gave speeches, published articles, and organized meetings in support of women's rights. She also helped to found the National Women's Suffrage Association, which fought for women's right to vote. The word suffrage means the right to vote. Women finally got the right to vote throughout the United States when the 19th Amendment to the Constitution was passed. This happened in 1920, 14 years after Susan B. Anthony's death. It probably wouldn't have happened if not for the pioneering efforts of Susan B. Anthony and the other women who worked with her during the 1800s. So the right answer to this question, what did Susan B. Anthony do, is she fought for women's rights or she fought for civil rights. That brings us to the end of the 1800s in our quick look at American history. Now let's turn to the next part of the history test, which covers recent American history and other important historical information. Question 78. Name one war fought by the United States in the 1900s. This is a question with a star. The United States took part in 5 major wars during the 1900s. It fought in World War I, beginning in 1917. In World War I, the U.S. fought alongside such nations as Great Britain and France against Germany and Austria-Hungary, winning World War I in 1919. In World War II, the United States fought alongside the Allied nations, including Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, against the Axis nations of Germany, Italy, and Japan. The United States entered World War II in 1941, and the war ended in victory for the Allies in 1945. The third major war of the 1900s was the Korean War. The Korean War was fought from 1950 to 1953. In this war, the democratic government of South Korea, supported by the United States and other countries, fought for its freedom against the communist government of North Korea, which was supported by China and the Soviet Union. The war ended with the two Koreas remaining separate. The United States fought in the Vietnam War from 1965 to 1975. This was a war for control of the country of Vietnam between the communists of North Vietnam and the government of South Vietnam, supported by the U.S. The war ended with Vietnam united under the communists. The Persian Gulf War, the last of the major wars of the 1900s, was fought in 1991 against Iraq. The purpose of the Persian Gulf War was to free the country of Kuwait, which Iraq had invaded. The war lasted just a few days, and it ended with Kuwait regaining its freedom. You could answer this question about the wars in which the U.S. participated in the 1900s by answering with the name of any of these 5 wars: World War I, or World War II, or the Korean War, or the Vietnam War, or the Persian Gulf War. Question 79. Who was president during World War I? The American president during World War I was Woodrow Wilson. After the war ended in 1919, Wilson took part in the peace negotiations in Paris. All the countries that had participated in World War I on the winning side met together in Paris to decide how the world ought to be organized in the years that followed. One of their hopes was to create an organization that might prevent future major wars from breaking out. Wilson played an important role in this meeting. At the meeting, the League of Nations was started, an international organization that was supposed to help keep the peace. The United States, however, did not choose to join the League of Nations, although Wilson wanted the United States to do this. And the League of Nations failed to prevent World War II just a few years later. Nonetheless, Wilson was a very important American president because of his role in leading the United States during World War I. The correct answer to this question, who was president during World War I, is Woodrow Wilson. Question 80. Who was president during the Great Depression and World War II? The most difficult period of the 1900s for the United States and for much of the world was the period from 1929 through 1945. In 1929, the Great Depression began. This was a time of terrible economic hardship when millions of people were without work. Many families lost their homes. Millions of people lived in poverty. The United States was just beginning to recover from the Depression when World War II began. Starting in 1939, most of the world was involved in the most destructive fighting in history. Millions of people were killed. Beginning in 1941, the United States joined World War II and fought alongside the Allies until the Axis powers were defeated in 1945. The president throughout most of this period, from 1933 until his death in 1945, was Franklin D. Roosevelt. Many historians consider Franklin D. Roosevelt one of our greatest presidents. So the correct answer to this question, who was president during the Great Depression and World War II, is Franklin Roosevelt. Question 81. Who did the United States fight in World War II? As I've mentioned, the Axis countries against whom the United States fought during World War II were Germany, Italy, and Japan. So the correct answer to this question is Japan, Germany, and Italy. Question 82. Before he was president, Eisenhower was a general. What war was he in? Dwight D. Eisenhower served as President of the United States from 1953 to 1961. Before that, he was a general in the Army. He served as leader of all the Allied forces during World War II. His success in this conflict made Eisenhower one of the most popular men in the world. It certainly helped him get elected as President of the United States. The correct answer to this question, what war was Eisenhower in as a general, is World War II. Question 83. During the Cold War, what was the main concern of the United States? During World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union fought on the same side to defeat the Axis powers of Germany, Italy, and Japan. However, after that war ended, the United States and the Soviet Union started a time of rivalry for power and influence around the world. This time was known as the Cold War. It was referred to as a Cold War because it didn't involve any direct fighting between the United States and the Soviet Union. So it wasn't a hot war with bullets actually flying between the two countries. Instead, these two powers engaged in other forms of rivalry and battles for power in areas around the world, from Asia to Africa to Latin America. The Cold War began in 1947 and continued until 1989. During this time, the United States was eager to support democratic governments around the world. It also wanted to resist the spread of the form of government found in the Soviet Union, known as communism. The wars fought by the United States during the Cold War period, including the Korean War and the Vietnam War, were both related to this desire by the United States, that is, the desire to prevent communism from spreading to more countries. So the correct answer to this question is, during the Cold War, the main concern of the United States was communism. Question 84. What movement tried to end racial discrimination? As I've explained, the Civil War between the North and the South brought an end to slavery in the United States. But black people in this country still did not enjoy equal rights with white people. In some parts of the United States, especially in the southern states, there were unfair laws. These laws made it difficult or impossible for black people to vote. There were also laws and rules that forced black people to attend separate schools, to live in different neighborhoods, and even to eat at different restaurants from white people. These unfair practices continued from the late 1800s into the middle of the 1900s. Because these laws and rules created barriers between people based on race, they were often referred to as racial discrimination. Finally, in the 1950s, a movement of many Americans began to fight for freedom for all Americans, including black Americans. This movement was the Civil Rights Movement. After years of hard work and conflict, the Civil Rights Movement convinced Congress to pass new laws. These new laws ended most forms of racial discrimination. Today, black Americans can attend the same schools, live in the same neighborhoods, and go to the same restaurants as any other Americans. So the right answer to this question is the movement that tried to end racial discrimination was the Civil Rights Movement. Question 85. What did Martin Luther King Jr. do? This is a question with a star. Martin Luther King Jr. was the greatest leader of the Civil Rights Movement. A minister from the southern state of Georgia, Martin Luther King Jr. led peaceful demonstrations around the nation to point out the injustice of racial discrimination. He made speeches, he wrote books and articles, and he urged Congress to change the unfair laws that created racial discrimination. King helped to found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is one of the leading civil rights organizations in the United States. In 1964, he won the Nobel Peace Prize, honoring his work on behalf of civil rights and freedom for all Americans. Sadly, in 1968, King was assassinated or killed by a gunman who opposed his work on behalf of civil rights. The correct answer to the question, what did Martin Luther King Jr. do, is he fought for civil rights, or he worked for equality for all Americans. Question 86. What major event happened on September 11th, 2001 in the United States? Perhaps the most unforgettable event in recent American history took place on this date. On September 11th, 2001, 4 planes filled with passengers were hijacked or taken over by terrorists. These planes were used in an act of war against the United States. 2 of the planes were deliberately flown into the towers of the World Trade Center, the tallest buildings in New York City. Another plane was flown into the Pentagon. The Pentagon is the office building in Washington, D.C., where the U.S. military is managed. The 4th plane was supposed to be flown into the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. But the passengers took that plane back from the hijackers, Instead of being crashed into the Capitol building, that plane crashed into the ground in Pennsylvania. Thousands of people were killed in several locations in this terrorist attack. As a result, the words 9/11 and September 11th have enormous, sad meaning for Americans to this day. So the correct answer to this question, what happened on September 11th, 2001, is terrorists attacked the United States. Question 87. Name one American Indian tribe in the United States. As I explained, before European colonists came to settle in North America, the land was inhabited by people known as Native Americans or American Indians. Today, there are fewer American Indians than there were before the Europeans came, but American Indians are still living in many parts of the country. Known as tribes, these various groups of Indians are recognized by the federal government as nations of their own with specific rights to govern themselves. To answer this question correctly, you only need to name one of these American Indian tribes. The list of possible correct answers includes all of the following tribes, so any one of these would be correct. The tribes are Cherokee, Navajo, Sioux, Chippewa, Choctaw, Pueblo, Apache, Iroquois, Creek, Blackfeet, Seminole, Cheyenne, Arawak, Shawnee, Mohegan, Huron, Oneida, Lakota, Crow, Teton, Hopi, or Inuit. Well, that concludes the history portion of the civics test. Next, we'll look at some questions in the category of integrated or combined civics. The category begins with questions about geography. Question 88. Name one of the two longest rivers in the United States. Take a look at this map. It highlights the two longest rivers in the United States, which are also two of the longest rivers in the world. Both the Mississippi River and the Missouri River are over 2,300 miles or 3,700 kilometers long. These two rivers have played an important role in the American economy and history. The Mississippi River and the Missouri River provided ways for farm products and other goods to be carried by boat. So they helped to make the middle western states of the United States some of the most fertile, productive, and prosperous farmland in the world. The correct answer to this question is the Missouri River or the Mississippi River. Question 89. What ocean is on the west coast of the United States? The United States is bounded on the east and the west by two oceans. If you know the patriotic song, America, you may remember the words it uses to describe our country, from sea to shining sea. That refers to the two oceans that lie on either side of the United States. Much of America's wealth comes from those two oceans. The Pacific Ocean on the west coast gives America access to all the countries that border the Pacific, including Japan, China, and other countries of Asia. Today, the United States does much business with the countries of the Pacific Rim, including the growing populations of the countries of Asia. The Atlantic Ocean on our east coast gives us access to Europe and Africa. Living between these two great oceans makes the United States a powerful trading country, able to do business with nations around the world. The answer to this question about the ocean on our west coast is the Pacific Ocean. Question 90. What ocean is on the east coast of the United States? And the correct answer to this question is the Atlantic Ocean. Question 91. Name one U.S. territory. As I've mentioned before, the United States has 50 states. It also has several territories, which are part of the United States, but are not counted as states. That means they do not elect voting members of Congress, and they do not vote for President of the United States. You could answer this question correctly by naming any of the following U.S. territories: Puerto Rico, or the U.S. Virgin Islands, or American Samoa, or the Northern Mariana Islands, or Guam. Question 92. Name one state that borders Canada. The northern border of the United States touches the country of Canada. As you can see by looking at this map, there are 13 American states that border Canada. You can answer this question correctly by naming any one of those states. So any of the following is correct: Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota, North Dakota, Montana, Idaho, Washington, or Alaska. Question 93. Name one state that borders Mexico. The southwestern border of the United States touches the country of Mexico. The map shows that 4 states border Mexico. To answer the question correctly, name any one of the 4: California, or Arizona, or New Mexico, or Texas. Question 94. What is the capital of the United States? This question has a star. You know the answer to this question since we've mentioned it before. The capital of the United States, the city where most of the offices of our government are located, is Washington, D.C. Question 95. Where is the Statue of Liberty? This is a question with a star, so it's one of the 20 most important questions that older applicants for citizenship need to be able to answer. I'm sure you've seen pictures of this famous landmark of the United States. The Statue of Liberty was given as a gift to the United States by the people of France in 1886. The Statue of Liberty stands for freedom. It welcomes visitors and immigrants to this country from its location in one of the nation's great seaports between the states of New York and New Jersey at the mouth of the Hudson River. There are several correct answers to this question: where is the Statue of Liberty? You could answer any of the following: in New York Harbor, or on Liberty Island, or in New Jersey, or near New York City, or on the Hudson River. The next portion of the civics test includes several questions about important symbols of the United States. Here they are. Question 96. Why does the flag have 13 stripes? As you probably know, there are 3 colors in the American flag: red, white, and blue. The flag has 2 parts: a field with 13 red and white stripes, and a smaller portion that is dark blue with 50 white stars. Maybe you can guess the answer to this question about the 13 red and white stripes. Do you remember hearing the number 13 earlier in this program? That's right. The United States began with 13 states, made from 13 colonies that broke away from Britain. So the 13 stripes on our flag represent those 13 original states. The correct answer to this question is because there were 13 original colonies, or because the stripes represent the original colonies. Question 97. Why does the flag have 50 stars? This question has a star. As you might remember, the United States today has 50 states. The 50 stars on our flag represent those states. What would happen if another state or 2 joined the Union? Yes, another star or 2 would be added to the flag. Maybe that will happen someday. But in the meantime, the correct answer to this question is because there's 1 star for each state, or because each star represents a state, or because there are 50 states. Question 98. What is the name of the national anthem? The national anthem is a song that stands for our country. You hear it played at sports events, at big gatherings such as graduation ceremonies, on patriotic holidays, and at civic meetings. Our national anthem is named after our country's flag. It's called the Star-Spangled Banner, which describes the flag with its 50 stars. So the correct answer to the question, what is the name of the national anthem, is the Star-Spangled Banner. The test ends with a couple of questions about holidays, another kind of symbol of the United States. Question 99. When do we celebrate Independence Day? This question has a star. Remember that the Declaration of Independence was accepted by the members of the Continental Congress on July 4th, 1776. That day, July 4th, has since been celebrated as our biggest national holiday, a day when we remember the contributions that our founding fathers made to our freedom, and we celebrate the fact that the United States is an independent country blessed with democracy and the gift of self-government. The fact that July 4th is in the middle of summer makes it a perfect holiday for barbecues, picnics, trips to the beach, and fireworks shows. Let's hope you'll be celebrating next July 4th as a new American citizen. The answer to this question is July 4th. And finally, question 100. Name two national U.S. holidays. Independence Day isn't our only national holiday. We also celebrate New Year's Day every January 1st, which is the first day of the year. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the third Monday of January, which honors the greatest leader of the civil rights movement. President's Day, which is the third Monday of February, a day that's set aside to honor and remember the contributions of all presidents of the United States. Memorial Day, the last Monday in May, a day when we honor soldiers and sailors and others who died fighting to preserve American freedom. Labor Day, the first Monday in September, a day when we honor the contributions of working men and women in building America. Columbus Day, the second Monday in October, a day that commemorates the voyages of Christopher Columbus, the European explorer who first set foot on American shores. Veterans Day, November 11th, a day when we honor those who have fought for the United States in wars. Thanksgiving, the fourth Thursday of November, a day that is set aside to thank God for the many blessings that Americans enjoy. And Christmas Day, December 25th. You can answer the question correctly by naming any two of those days: New Year's Day, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, President's Day, Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, Columbus Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Another day you should know, although it's not on this list of national holidays, is Flag Day. Flag Day is celebrated every June 14th. It's a day to honor and celebrate our national flag, the Star-Spangled Banner. However, it's not on this list of national holidays because it is not a day off for most working people. However, Flag Day is an important patriotic holiday and one that all new citizens ought to know about. So remember that. Flag Day, June 14th. That is the 100th question, so this completes the civics test. I've given you a lot of information, haven't I? If you don't feel as though you remember it all, that's all right. Very few people learn all these facts from one study period. Remember that you can view this program several times if necessary. You can also use flashcards and other study materials to practice your civics knowledge. Spend a little time studying civics every day. After several weeks, you will probably find that you know a lot about American government and history. Soon, you will feel very confident about passing your civics test. Now we'll talk about the English test. There are three parts to the English test: speaking, reading, and writing. These are the three skills that the USCIS is supposed to check before approving you for citizenship. The speaking part of the English test may not really seem like a test. Actually, the entire interview is your speaking test. Throughout the interview, the USCIS officer will rate or measure your ability to speak English based on your answers to the questions that the officer asks. For example, the officer might ask you questions like these. How long have you been living in the United States? What kind of work do you do? Are you married? What country were you born in? If you can understand these questions and answer them appropriately, the officer will know that you are able to speak English. Earlier in this program, I talked a little bit about how you can handle the interview effectively. The same advice will help you pass the speaking test. Listen carefully to the questions from the officer. Ask for an explanation if you ever feel confused. Then do your best to answer the questions simply, clearly, and accurately. Take your time. Don't try to rush. The officer understands that English is probably not your first language. You aren't expected to speak perfectly. As long as the officer can understand you, you will get a passing score. Now let's talk about the reading test. For the reading test, the officer will give you 3 English sentences to read. These sentences may be either statements or questions, but most often they are questions. You must read at least one of these 3 sentences aloud correctly. You must be able to read the sentence aloud without any long pauses. It's all right to make a small mistake or two, as long as your mistake doesn't prevent the officer from understanding the sentence. For instance, if you leave out a small word that doesn't change the meaning of the sentence, the officer will score your reading as being correct. It also doesn't matter if you speak English with an accent or if you pronounce a word badly, as long as the officer can understand you. The USCIS has tried to make it easy for you to prepare for the reading test. To help you, they have created a vocabulary list. This is a list of English words that you will be expected to know. These are the only words you need to know for the reading test, because all of the sentences you could be asked are put together with these words only. Prepare by studying this vocabulary list. I think you'll find most or all of these words familiar, because all of them have been used in this program as part of our review of topics for the civic and history test. Let's go through the list together. First, we have words relating to people. Abraham Lincoln, George Washington. Next, words related to civics. American flag, Bill of Rights, capital, citizen, city, Congress, country, father of our country, government, president, right, senators, state, states, and White House. Next, places: America, United States, and US. Holidays: President's Day, Memorial Day, Flag Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, Columbus Day, Thanksgiving. Question words: how, what, when, where, who, and why. Next, verbs, words describing actions. Can, come, do or does, elects, have or has, is, are, was, and be, lives or lived, meet, name, pay, vote, and want. Other words, function words: a, for, here, in, of, on, the, to, and we, and other words, content words, colors, dollar bill, first, largest, many, most, north, one, people, second, and south. As you can see, this is not a very long or difficult list. If you spend a little time studying these words every day, I think you can learn them within a few weeks. Now let's test your knowledge of these vocabulary words by having you read 15 sample sentences that are like the ones you may be asked to read by the USCIS officer. I'll give you time to read each sentence on your own. Then I'll read it to you, and you can see whether you read it correctly or not. Read sentence 1. Sentence 1 says, "Who has the right to vote in the United States?" Now read sentence 2. Sentence 2 says, "Who was the father of our country?" Read sentence 3. Sentence 3 says, "When is Independence Day in the United States?" Read sentence 4. Sentence 4 says, "How many states are in the United States?" Read sentence 5. Sentence 5 says, "Where does the U.S. Congress meet?" Read sentence 6. Sentence 6 says, "What does the Bill of Rights do for people in the United States?" Read sentence 7. Sentence 7 says, "Who was the second president of the United States?" Read sentence 8. Sentence 8 says, "When is Flag Day?" Read sentence 9. Sentence 9 says, "What country is north of the United States?" Read sentence 10. Sentence 10 says, "What president is on the $1 bill?" Read sentence 11. Sentence 11 says, "In what city is the White House?" Read sentence 12. Sentence 12 says, "How many colors are in the American flag?" Read sentence 13. Sentence 13 says, "Who elects U.S. senators?" Read sentence 14. Sentence 14 says, what is the largest city in the United States? Read sentence 15. Sentence 15 says, when was Abraham Lincoln president? How well did you do at reading these 15 sample sentences? Did you get 10 or more sentences right? If so, you're doing very well. Did you get 5 to 9 sentences right? That's not bad. With a little more study, you should be a very good reader of English. Did you get fewer than 5 right? If so, you need to do a good amount of study and practice before applying for citizenship. Now, the writing test. To test your skill in writing English, the officer will dictate or read aloud 3 sentences in English. You must listen to the sentences and write at least one of the 3 sentences correctly. As with the reading test, you may make 1 or 2 small errors and still pass the writing test. If you spell a word incorrectly, for example, by using 1 or 2 wrong letters, or if you leave out a small word, it will be all right, as long as the meaning of the sentence is still clear to the officer. If the sentence contains a number, you may write it out or print it as a number. Once again, USCIS has tried to help you prepare for this test. They have created a vocabulary list of words that may be used in the writing test. Prepare by studying the vocabulary list. Again, the words are probably familiar to you by now because we used them in helping you prepare for the civics and history test. Let's go through the writing vocabulary list together. First, some words related to people. Adams, Lincoln, Washington. Words related to civics. American Indians, Capitol, citizens, Civil War, Congress, Father of our country, flag, free, freedom of speech, president, right, senators, state or states, White House. Next, words that name places. Alaska, California, Canada, Delaware, Mexico, New York City, United States, Washington, Washington, D.C. Some words naming months. February, May, June, July, September, October, November. Words naming holidays. President's Day, Memorial Day, Flag Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, Columbus Day, Thanksgiving. Next, some verbs. Can, come, elect, have or has, is, was or be, lives or lived, meets, pay, vote, want. Other words, including function words, and, during, for, here, in, of, on, the, to, and we. And other words that are content words. Blue, dollar bill, 50, first, largest, most, north, 1, 100, people, red, second, south, taxes, white. Once again, we're going to give you a chance to test your knowledge. I'm going to dictate or read aloud 15 sentences like those the USCIS officer may ask you. Listen carefully as I read each sentence aloud. Then write it down on a piece of paper. After a moment, I'll show you what the sentence should look like. See how well you did with your own writing. If you need to pause the program while you get a paper and pencil or pen, please do. Then come back and I'll read aloud the 15 practice writing sentences. Sentence 1. Independence Day is in July. Independence Day is in July. Sentence 1 should look like this. Sentence 2. Alaska is one of the 50 states. Alaska is one of the 50 states. Sentence 2 should look like this. Sentence 3. The American Indians lived here in the United States. The American Indians lived here in the United States. Sentence 3 should look like this. Sentence 4. The flag of the United States is red, white, and blue. The flag of the United States is red, white, and blue. Sentence 4 should look like this. Sentence 5. The capital of the United States is Washington, D.C. The capital of the United States is Washington, D.C. Sentence 5 should look like this. Sentence 6. Lincoln was president during the Civil War. Lincoln was president during the Civil War. Sentence 6 should look like this. Sentence 7. People in the United States have to pay taxes. People in the United States have to pay taxes. Sentence 7 should look like this. Sentence 8. Adams was the second president of the United States. Adams was the second president of the United States. Sentence 8 should look like this. Sentence 9. Delaware was the first state. Delaware was the first state. Sentence 9 should look like this. Sentence 10. People in the United States have freedom of speech. People in the United States have freedom of speech. Sentence 10 should look like this. Sentence 11. Citizens vote for president in November. Citizens vote for president in November. Sentence 11 should look like this. Sentence 12. Mexico is south of the United States. Mexico is south of the United States. Sentence 12 should look like this. Sentence 13. Flag Day is in June. Flag Day is in June. Sentence 13 should look like this. Sentence 14. President's Day is in February. President's Day is in February. Sentence 14 should look like this. Sentence 15. The White House is in Washington, D.C. The White House is in Washington, D.C. Sentence 15 should look like this. How well did you do at writing these 15 sample sentences? Did you get 10 or more right? If so, good job. Did you get 5 to 9 right? That's fairly good. With a little more study, you should be good at writing English. Did you get fewer than 5 right? If so, you need to do a good amount of study and practice in writing before applying for citizenship. Here are a few specific ways to practice and improve your skills in speaking, reading, and writing English before you take the citizenship test. Make a habit of using English at least a little bit every day. Spend time each day listening to English on the radio or on television. Pay special attention to news programs that talk about government, voting, and other civics topics. Read newspapers and magazines in English. Even if you don't understand all of the stories, read as much as you can, and over time you'll find that you can understand more and more, and your English skills will continue to improve. Look especially for articles and stories that deal with government, voting, and other civics topics. At work, at school, or in your neighborhood, Speak English as often as you can. Ask friends who are good speakers of English to correct your errors when they notice them. And get together with others who are preparing for the citizenship test and take turns testing one another. If you use these methods, you'll find your English skills improving little by little every day.